Good afternoon. Welcome to the Charting the Life Course Virtual Showcase 2020. This month we're focusing on transition to adulthood, focusing on employment. My name is Shelley Reynolds and I am with the University of Missouri Kansas City Institute for Human Development, and I'm here to facilitate our conversation. We're really excited about today's panel because of the focus on employment and a lot of different ideas about engaging at a systems level, at a family level, working with individuals with disabilities. And I can't wait to kind of get started and share that with you. Before I do that though, I want to just kind of give you a really quick overview of what our time's going to be like together and what this really is. You know, who thought that back in when we were launching this in June, that we would still be a little bit in the same place we are with COVID. But we started this out. This is typically a live event that we do in Kansas City where we bring a lot of people together to really learn and share, exchange, build ideas, connect with one another. We do this as part of the University of Missouri Kansas City Institute for Human Development, what we now call the Charting the Life Course Nexus. And so the Nexus is an opportunity and a place for you to call and connect with us, email with us, get on our website to come together, to exchange, build, and network on a number of different things related to Life Course. The Charting the Life Course framework, which many of you are familiar with, which is why you're here today, has become a framework for really driving transformational change. And I think you'll hear that from our panel today and hear about all of the change they're doing at all different levels. You'll be able to see how they're using the framework as a language, as icons, as this sort of guiding principles, along with the different tools and strategies for doing that transformational change, especially as it relates to adulthood and employment outcomes. We hope that this showcase is an opportunity for you to learn from other experts from around the country. And we hope that you'll stay engaged with us by joining us on our website or connecting on different conferences or Zoom calls and things like that. The other thing that I think is important for people to know is that the Life Course framework, at the heart and soul of what it's designed to do is really a framework to really help explore life possibilities, share ideas, hopes, and fears, set higher expectations, navigate the future, advocate for a vision, problem solve, and plan. This is especially important as we really talk about the outcome related to employment and how important it is to have high expectations for people with disabilities around employment and around adulthood and around community life. And you'll hear that today. The virtual showcase has been made possible because of our sponsors. So we have a lot of sponsors who sponsor the overall showcase. And then we have the opportunity for those sponsors to also really highlight in a particular month. So I'll share that with you in just a second. So each month we do these live sessions. So I just want to tell you that if you've missed some of our other live sessions, they're all on our website. So if you go to lifecoursetools.com, you'll find the same hour and a half long session archived there for you to view. In July, we focused on education. In August, we looked at person-centered outcomes. September, we looked at staff development. We looked in October, obviously we're focusing on employment, and I hope you'll join us again in November as we really look at empowering individuals with disabilities and their families. If the hour and a half long session is too long for you and you're really curious what each of the presenters have to say, each one of them provided us with a TED Talk type of talk. For about 5 to 10 minutes, they gave us a highlight of what their session was about. Those are for you to learn from and share with other people. Those are on our website as well. So with that, though, I do want to take the opportunity to pass it over to our featured sponsor. This is an organization I started working with last year and probably actually longer ago than last year, and really excited that they continue to support and participate with the Charting the Life course. So with that, Malik, if you wouldn't mind turning on your camera.
Sure. I think I have it here, and there we go. I apologize. I have a mask on and I'm sitting in a hospital, but it's all for safety's sakes. Thank you so much, Shelley. First of all, I just want to say, I had the pleasure of meeting Shelley. It seems like decades ago, but it wasn't that long ago, and instantly saw we shared the same vision, and charting a life course is really there to help promote independence and a vision for a good life for individuals, and that's kind of what we share. Station MD, I'm going to just take a real quick minute to tell you what we do, and then I will turn it back over to Shelley. I am one of the founders and a physician with Station MD, and our goal is really to improve the quality of medical care provided to really individuals with IDD and vulnerable populations. We happen to use telehealth and telemedicine to bring kind of the physician upstream. And unfortunately, what's happened with the crisis and the pandemic has really just underscored the relevancy and the value of our solution. Now more than ever, keeping individuals safe and in their home setting, whether it be in their own home or in a group home setting or even a congregate care setting, I think it's imperative. All of us on this call are advocates in some way, shape, or form, and I think this population, for a variety of reasons, is more vulnerable. But what we do is really bring the physician to the individual and provide that medical care. I will put my contact information in the chat box if you want to learn more. Of course, you can go to our website, stationmd.com. But we are extremely proud to sponsor and work closely with Charting the Life Course and Shelley Reynolds and her team. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks. Thank you, Malik. And I'll give personal testimony to the fact that the state of Missouri is part of Station MD, and all of the individuals that have Medicaid waiver in the state of Missouri through the Division of Developmental Disabilities have access to using this service for free. And as a sibling of a brother with a developmental disabilities, a couple months into the COVID crisis, we needed to utilize this service, and was able to contact Station MD, talk to the physicians on using telehealth, and we're able to get our needs met really quickly, which enabled us to not have to go to the emergency room. We were in and out within an hour and a half, having talked to a physician, having already gone to the pharmacy and picked up the prescription. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity that all the physicians are trained specifically to work with people with developmental disabilities, and they have access to the records if that's what you want as a family or as an organization. So thank you, Station MD, for supporting this month and supporting the work of the Charting the Life course.
Thank you.
So with that, it's an opportunity for us to move into our focus area of really talking about how Charting the Life course is being utilized across the country, specifically focusing on employment. So I'm really excited to start passing this over. So in our time together, we're going to hear from 5 different panelists. The first one's going to talk about what's work got to do with it, really looking at that sort of system siloing approach and moving away from that. We're then going to hear from a group that's going to talk to you about how they use Charting the Life course to enhance, life possibilities using social media. Moving then into supporting self-determination and employment through supported decision-making. We're going to hear from a provider on how they integrated LifeCourse within their organization, and then hear about how families are being supported to create a vision for the future and some specific examples of that application. So with that, I'm really excited. I'm going to pass it over to Maya Cox, who is going to share with us what's work got to do with that.
Thanks so much, Shelley. Good afternoon, everybody. And we can go ahead and get started. Happy to present with you guys today about what's work got to do with it. So just like all of the other transitions and phases in life, LifeCourse can be used to figure out what the good life looks like in adulthood. And if you ask folks what they want in their good life, or perhaps for a family member what their good life looks like in adulthood, oftentimes the answers all surround relationships, new experiences, contributing to their family, to their community, and having some sort of enjoyment and fun. And while all of these elements might look a little different in every person's life, oftentimes they still fall within these different categories. And for most adults, work is how many of these boxes are checked. We think about the people we've met through work as, key parts of our life, of our relationships, of contributing. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we get to have a lot of fun or some fun, and we certainly get to work to help others and to contribute in some way. And so when we think about building skills for youth, we should have the same expectations for a good life, right? And it makes sense to consider work as a way to get there, just like we would expect work to most likely be a part of a person's life if they didn't have a disability. So I'm proud to say that I am a Hoosier, living and working in Indiana. Indiana adopted the LifeCourse framework in 2016, and they are expanding this approach to unsilo supports. So they have been collaborating with vocational rehabilitation and the Department of Education to build capacity. And so Public Consulting Group, my employer, was contracted to develop and deliver trainings to support transition-age youth, their families, and school personnel to understand how LifeCourse can help plan for adulthood and employment. So Indiana was previously using this service with people, or this approach with people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities in their waivers, and now it's being expanded into employment and considering those supports during high school is the time. And so in Indiana, PCG does a number of things like training and technical assistance, and we also provide pre-employment transition services. And we were really excited to help build the framework out and help support Indiana in this way. So pre-employment transition services, or PREETs, are different services for students with disabilities that they can get in school and in their community to complement any transition services they might already be receiving through their school system. And the whole purpose and the whole goal of these services are to help prepare for employment and opportunities after school. And we could talk all day about PREETs. But I've provided a link here if you'd like to learn more about this service. So, PREETs, the PREETs population, or transition age youth, it's a really exciting opportunity to help students understand and maybe think about what work might have to do with their good life and help prepare. It's also a fantastic opportunity for students who might be receiving services through school right now, through their VR service provider, getting PREETs, and then may also either be getting services through the intellectual and developmental disabilities services in Indiana, or they might in the future. Let's use the language and approach through all these different ways and all these different places. So to get there, we were excited to have 10 face-to-face workshop sessions across the state for students, families, and schools. We're going to prepare lots of examples, help people apply the information to their cases and to their own lives. And then, of course, COVID-19 happened and everything changed. So what we did is we moved our approach, we pivoted to webinars, to online and paper-based resources. And I'd love to share a few of those with you today. So here is the front page of a crosswalk that was developed to match the domains of LifeCourse to the activities of pre-employment transition services. And I know it's a lot of words on the page, and this is just the first of several pages, but it was a great tool that can show folks how employment and preparing for employment truly impacts all areas of a person's life. And we can think about this during transition planning services. We can think about this as we consider what kinds of supports a person needs. And, how can we connect the IEP process and what, current goals they have and help align those PREETs goals and so forth, so that we can all work together toward the same common goal. And here is another resource. It's a workbook that is currently online and paper-based. And this resource was created to support students, families, and anybody who might be supporting them in considering employment as a part of their future. And we wanted these resources to be available to everyone. And it is a workbook, but we really wanted it to be something that a person could peruse, read through, fill out, and then use as a resource to consider on an ongoing basis. So the reason that we have paper-based resources is that when we were, shifting to all the school services went online in Indiana, and we learned that probably 15% of transition-aged youth and their families did not have access to reliable internet or a computer. And we really did not want to add another additional barrier to preparing and planning for employment. So it really made sense to offer this online for those families that it made sense to access the workbook online, as well as paper-based, so that, if folks were unable to access the internet or not reliably, that they had an option available to them. So this workbook is available online. There is a hyperlink on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, and I'd encourage you to check it out. So that's all I have to share today. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya. That's fantastic. And a couple of you have asked about the PowerPoint presentation. So in a couple of days, when we're finished with this whole thing will be archived and on the actual page for the LifeCourse showcase, and the PowerPoint should be there as well. So we'll get that to you as well. So great questions. Thank you. Thank you, Maya. It's really great to see how you guys have implemented that at the systems level and really incorporated that into that pre-employment transition specialist position across the state of Indiana. With that, though, I'd like to introduce Allison Cohen-Hall from ThinkWork, who's going to share with us how they utilize LifeCourse for social media. I forgot to say at the beginning of this is that each of the presenters are going to do a really quick 5 to 7 minute overview of their initiatives, and then we're going to open it up to questions and answers. So I will be taking them through some questions, but be thinking about questions you might have and put them either in the chat or the question and answers, and we will be sure to ask them about their specific projects as you go along. So with that, I'm going to pass it on over to Allison.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Hi, everybody. My name is Allison Hall, and I'm from the Institute for Community Inclusion at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. So as Shelley said, I'm going to talk really briefly about a study that we did involving charting the LifeCourse through a social media platform. I also want to mention that I am one of several who worked on this project, and my colleagues include John Shepard, Jamie Timmons, and Jen Bose. It was really a team effort, so I just want to make sure to mention them. So what did we do? Over the course of 6 months, we provided enrolled families. So those are families with youth with IDD between the ages of 12 and 18. And we provided them with resources from the daily life and employment section of Charting the LifeCourse. They joined a Facebook group. They got weekly outreach through the Facebook group and accompanying resources, tools and videos. They also got the opportunity to build relationships with other families that were in the study through online chat. They had access to experts on employment, transition, and charting the LifeCourse content. And because this was a research study, we really wanted to understand what changes charting the LifeCourse could make in the lives of families. We did what we call a pre-test and a post-test. So we did families filled out a questionnaire before they started participating in the 6-month intervention. Then they participated, and then they filled out surveys at the end when they were finished. And then a few of them, people agreed to have exit interviews with us so we could talk directly to some family members. Next slide. So we had about 58 family members participated and 26, so 58 participated throughout the 6 months, but we got that pre-test data from 58 families. We only got post-test data from 26 families. So the data that we're looking at is from about half the sample, but this was kind of a pilot study. So we were just interested in identifying some initial findings to see the effectiveness of charting the LifeCourse. So we measured change in 3 areas, and you see them up on the screen. The first area where we wanted to measure change is expectations for the future. Do parents who participate in Charting the Life course via social media for 6 months, do their expectations for the future change with respect to, is their child going to work in the community when they get older? Are they going to work in a shelter workshop? So expectations for the future was one. Incremental steps towards a future vision. So that's these little small steps that families can take at any age of the child that ultimately could lead them on a path to employment, like having household chores, increasing autonomy at home, talking to neighbors about their jobs. So we called that incremental steps towards a future vision, and then attitudes and beliefs about inclusion. So on the screen, you see some bold red, and the bold red is significant increase. So we did see a significant increase. And a significant increase just means a measurable difference occurred in the pre and the post, so the before and the after. So families had higher expectations for the future after they participated with Charting the Life course. Oh, can you go back 1 second? Thank you. So families had higher expectations for the future, and then they reported a higher number of incremental steps towards a future vision. I just wanted to say one more thing about the slide before we move on. Attitudes and beliefs about inclusion, we didn't see any change. We think that's because families had already believed that inclusion was, they valued inclusion already. So we didn't see change from pre to post in attitudes and beliefs. Okay, now we can go on. Thanks. So when we talk about expectations for the future, here's just an example. This was largely related to what is my child going to do during the day when they grow up? How are they going to spend their time? So I think my youth will be able to find help if they have trouble finding a job shortly after high school. Participants were more likely to agree with this statement after the intervention. I think my youth will go to a sheltered workshop shortly after high school. Participants were more likely to disagree with this statement after the intervention. So next, I'm going to talk about incremental actions towards change. And again, these are the small steps that parents could take, again, at any age that can influence their children's trajectory, what path they take. So after participating, parents expressed greater agreement with the statements on the screen. My youth is learning about different jobs from family members, teachers, and others. My youth has a transition plan that is individualized and prepares them for adult life. And my youth knows their interests and likes and dislikes as they relate to employment. So in all those cases, family members were able to report greater agreement. So we're seeing that families are starting to take these small steps towards identifying interests, understanding what other jobs are about, making sure a transition plan is individualized. And then lastly, I just want to talk a minute about lessons learned and where we're going next. So based on what we learned from this smaller study, we plan to expand and do a larger study with more participants, definitely with more ethnic and income diversity in the sample over a longer period of time, and delivering smaller chunks of information. When we did those exit interviews with parents, we heard that there's so much incredible information on Charting the Life course, in particular in the content that we provided, but they wanted even smaller chunks of information at one time that were more digestible, and a greater use of social media, prompts, videos. So especially with the pandemic now, we really feel like engaging families online at their own pace seems like a particularly good way to keep families engaged in transition planning. And we were just so excited to do this research with Charting the Life course, because there hasn't been a lot of evidence-based research done on Charting the Life course. People are using it. People are talking about how important it is. But I think it's really cool that with this study, we're able to say that it had a measurable impact on families as they plan for transition. Thanks, everybody. I look forward to the questions.
Thanks, Allison. That was fantastic. Yeah, and those were things I wrote down too, is that it's really exciting to see how you combined social media and the LifeCourse for an education platform for doing this. And again, bringing a body of research around this is super exciting. So thank you. We'll be sure to ask you lots of questions. So next up is Erin Levinton. She's here to talk to us about supporting self-determination and employment through supported decision-making. So we are excited to hear from her and hear what she has to share with us.
Hey, everybody. It's great to be joining you today. I wish we were all live and together in Kansas City, but I know we'll meet there next year. So I'm a director at Alvarez & Marsal Public Sector Services. My work is around supporting state developmental disability systems. I've been lucky enough to be involved with charting the LifeCourse from the very beginning. So I want to start our conversation today talking about the intersection of supporting families, supported decision-making, and employment by defining a couple of key terms. The first is guardianship. So guardianship is a legal process, and in that process, a court, typically a state court, determines that a person has impaired decision-making capacity and appoints someone else to be the decision maker for the person. And that means that the person may lose their rights to make all kinds of decisions, including where to live, who to spend time with, and how they spend their day. Supported decision-making is a alternative to guardianship. It's grounded in self-determination. It's really a paradigm where the person with a disability makes choices with whatever support they need to do that, and the person ends up retaining their legal capacity. So in plain terms, what we're talking about is a person with a disability choosing somebody they want to support them, and that person supports them to make their decisions. And then the supporter does whatever the person needs to help the person with a disability make and communicate their decision. And that support is individualized with the level and the types of supports depending on both the person and the nature of the decision to be made. Now, guardianship is still the norm for many people with disabilities. When you look at national court indicator data, what you learn is that almost half of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who receive state services still have a guardian. And of those folks, about 3/4 of those guardians are family members. And so that puts the community of practice for supporting families in a really unique position to be able to partner with and support families around decision making so that they can support their loved ones to be as self-determined as possible, whether that's within the context of a guardianship or otherwise. And we know, right, that many families are already using supported decision-making every day, probably without using that formal title for it, as they help their family members navigate all sorts of day-to-day decisions. And there's just so much we can learn from that and help share about those journeys. So then how does all of this relate to employment, and why are we talking about supported decision-making? So we know, right, if we've been in the field, that the majority of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are either unemployed or underemployed, despite their ability, desire, and willingness to work in the community. Latest data shows that only 18% of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are working. And just yesterday, APSE, the Association of People Supporting Employment, held a community conversation on race. And among other things, we talked about the fact that as tough as this number is for all people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, statistics are significantly lower for Black people with developmental disabilities. And right, so we know there's so much more we can do to support people to have good employment outcomes. So in 2019, the National Court Indicator team did a deep dive into the question of what NCI data reveals about the guardianship status of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And what they found is people with guardians are significantly less likely to work in a community paid job, and less likely to have an individual job with or without support. In fact, only 10% of people had an individual job. People with guardians were also significantly less likely to have employment as a goal in their service plan. Only about 25% of people did, which meant their supports were not keeping them on a trajectory towards employment. Finally, people as guardians are significantly less likely to have control over day-to-day decisions in their lives, what their schedule is like, what they do in their free time, how they spend their day, and how they spend money. And each of those choices offers opportunities for learning and discovery around employment that people may miss. So here too, the community of practice is really in a position to make a difference. Parental expectations, that is having high expectations for their children, combined with parental involvement, parents who are active and knowledgeable participants in transition planning, have been identified as an evidence-based predictor of improved post-school outcomes for students with disabilities. So said in plain language, what we know is that parents who have a vision for a good life for their children, who see employment as part of their trajectory, and who are empowered to support their teen through transition planning are more likely to have children who grow up to graduate high school and work in competitive integrated employment. And so the state supporting families, community practice teams are just uniquely positioned to help change and improve this trajectory. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. That was fantastic. Very clear in such a very short amount of time. So with that, though, and make sure you write your questions down for Erin, and we'll be sure to ask her those. So coming up next is Danae, who's going to share with us the evolution of charting the life course within her organization.
Hi, I'm Danae Settles Allen. I'm glad to be here with you this afternoon, talking about the evolution of charting the life course framework within SEEK. SEEK has integrated the charting the life course framework within our staff training. So it's related to preparation of our annual person-centered plans. I currently serve as a Maryland ambassador through the Maryland Community of Practice for supporting families. And so in that capacity, I was able to introduce the life course tools to our community engagement staff. What we found was that the best way to help our staff understand the value of the tools was to use them personally and in their own lives. So this helps create a partnership with the staff, because when those staff feel valued and we as a provider, we're really listening to their needs, the staff are more engaged when it comes to the people that they support. Our DSPs, they're on the front lines in providing supports, and we ask a lot of them. So we're helping to create a kind of connection with the charting the life course framework in their own lives so that they can create that same connection with the people that they support. So it's like a dual effect in that staff are able to learn the value of the tools for themselves. And then ultimately they learn it, and they help the people they support in their trajectory. And now that staff are using the tools and grasping the concepts within the framework, they have been able to understand how planning and visioning for a person's life is very important. So we do individual team training with our community engagement staff, and they were able to create the tools based on their own lives. And then in turn, they were able to develop a competence with charting the life course framework. And that has helped with them creating the trajectory for the people they support. So there are several opportunities that arose for us during the time that we were brainstorming how to implement some of the tools within our organization. So we customized and implemented the life course tools with each project that you see listed here and the audience that we were speaking to or training. Because we were using the tools so often, our staff and they just grew in the understanding of the framework and usefulness for them in their work and for the people we support. So we used them in our person-centered plans, as I explained before, but we also, during the time of COVID quarantine, when it first began, we customized hospital profiles when we weren't sure if families could be supported by the people who know them best, their families. So sometimes people would initially go into the hospital and could not be supported. So we created customized profiles based on a one-page profile that was out of the life course tools. We were also granted some funding through the ARC of Maryland for a SPARK grant. And that was to support our efforts for helping families who were in the transitioning youth, trying to teach them ways to use the LifeCourse tools as they planned for moving out or potentially moving out with it when their son or daughter was ready. And we also currently use it in our DSP2 mentoring model, in teaching people how to create profiles and to use the profiles every day toward the trajectory every single day, and implementing how to make sure that the person is living their good life ultimately. So in our Moving Out series, this is a picture of the families that we now support to create. We've created pretty much a one-page profile and taught them how the usefulness of that and how to use that in their everyday lives. We've moved on to a trajectory. So each of these families has created a trajectory around moving out and the types of supports they need. And currently we're working on our integrated support stars. And what each family is doing is using that support star and what they currently have access to for all of the different domains and the different plans that they have for themselves, and looking at the resources they have available and then trying to see what they need for the future. So we've been able to create a profile for them that they're using toward moving out on their own eventually. So we've been able to use all of these tools with our families and the people that we provide services to, but we also use them with our staff. And I think that the combination of those three has created a partnership in our agency where we understand that having high expectations and a trajectory for a good life is a part. Everybody needs to be a part of the process: staff, parents, and the people we support. So I'm happy to share, and if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat and I'll be happy to answer.
Donna, that was really great. Thank you for giving us that overview, and what a wonderful picture of seeing everybody working on the stuff that you were working on with them. So we will be sure to have lots of great questions for you as well.
Absolutely.
So our next presenter is Cassidy, and she's going to share with us how to support how they've been supporting families and creating a vision for the future.
Thank you, Shelley, and thank you so much to all of the other presenters in this panel. So much great information has been shared, and I'm really just excited to be part of the discussion and share with you how our organization is using the framework to help transition-aged youth and their families prepare for employment. To begin, my name is Cassidy Job. I am a parent advocate of 2 teenage boys who are on the autism spectrum. I am also an ambassador and have been utilizing the Charting LifeCourse framework in my own life for several years with my children, and professionally started utilizing it about 2 years ago. So we utilize the framework. It is actually embedded into our career planning and pre-vocational program, which is called Watch Me Thrive. This program supports transition-aged youth in participating in work-based learning experiences through a volunteer and internship model. And we felt very passionately that we know that employment is largely driven by parental expectations. And in an attempt or with a focus on making sure that this particular program was as holistic as possible. We also include the parent mentoring component of planning for your child's future, that it does include employment. And we utilize the Charting the LifeCourse framework to do that. So while the youth is engaged in those work-based learning experiences, we're working hand in hand with families, helping them create a vision for their child's future and utilizing the framework to plan and prepare for employment. So the really wonderful thing is all of this is happening in real time, where families are seeing their child's work readiness skills improve, while at the same time, they're improving their own ability to plan for employment and really kind of exploring what all of those life possibilities are in tandem with their child. The effectiveness of the program, we see really just a wide variety of improvements in families' readiness. 100% of families report that they have higher expectations for their child's future. 80% of families report that they have an increase in their confidence in establishing integrated supports And then 75% of families report that they have increased confidence in using the Charting the Life course as a problem-solving tool. We talk a lot in these trainings about it really is transition planning is not a checklist, it's a process. And focusing on the families being empowered with these skills to use the framework over and over and over again, so that they know and they have that confidence that, you know what, maybe their child's first job or first kind of experience doesn't work out. They have something that they know that they can go back to, that's a resource for them that's going to help them move forward in that process.
Cassidy, that's great. So what I've asked the presenters now is to everybody turn their cameras on, and it's an opportunity for us to have a dialogue with them, because obviously the information they provided you was really quick, down and dirty, and each one of them probably could have shared for several hours the stuff that's going on with them. So we're excited to be able to kind of dig into this a little bit. So a lot of different people are on the call attending this, and each one of you have sort of hit this from a different angle. You know, Maya talked about systems change, Danae provided some very specific program examples, as well as Cassidy. So, you know, for people that are on this, what was the sort of spark or the interest for you, and like, how did you connect it to the things that you would do? So what I'm going to do is I'm calling you. You guys all show up different on everybody's screen. So Danae, I'm going to start with you. You're in my left-hand corner.
So I am a mom. That's the first thing that started for me. The spark was when I learned about the tools and the thought process behind it. I realized, oh my gosh, this is something that I can use personally. And so I started there and used it in IEP meetings with my son, and just saw a significant shift in the attitude of the service providers at school. And then I was able to share it with anyone. So he has OT and PT after school, was able to share it with them, and because they have insight into his specific interests and insight into what he wants to do and his strengths, they were able to focus on that rather than the weaknesses. And so when I saw that shift, I said, oh my gosh, I can totally use this at work, right? So we can just take this whole concept and shift attitudes with the staff. And once the staff began to use it for themselves, you can see like a light switch go off, because they couldn't understand. You see all these tools and you just can't understand how this all incorporates. But once they started doing them for themselves, they were saying, you know, this is going to definitely help me. And with my mom, you know, I have an aging mom and I need to help her plan some things, and we need to plan for her. And so now I can see, oh, how this impacts the person I support. I can see now how this trajectory can lead to some outcomes that at least sets a higher expectation for their lives.
Excellent. Thank you. So Erin, you're next on my screen. And Erin's been fun because Erin's been around we've been working before LifeCourse really kind of evolved to these tools and practices. She was around when it was our guiding principles as our original framework. So.
Yeah, so we first heard about the idea of a supporting families community practice when I was working in DC at the Department on Disability Services. We applied to be one of the first states to really think about how we influence this. And what was so exciting about it was that the time we were involved in really protracted class action litigation and around improving the rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we had made some good structural progress, but we really were stuck in that we needed to add values into the system. And to us, the idea of the supporting families community practice and the promise of the Charting LifeCourse framework gave us a way to really lean in and engage with families and engage with self-advocates and have them help us design the system of the future. And, you know, sort of in my work on systems change, you know, both in DC and onward, I mean, to me, Charting the LifeCourse and the trajectory are like the true north, right? They keep you focused on the trajectory to the system that we all want to build. And, you know, the integrated supports remind you that, like, you're not in it alone. You're a part of a community.
Maya, would you share with us sort of what sort of sparked it for you?
Sure. So I am also a family member. I have a younger sister with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so it's definitely something that's both, I come at it from both personal and professional perspectives, just like my colleagues have shared today. And I come from a background of employment services. My first real job out of college was as a job coach for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and employment for people with disabilities is an incredible passion of mine. I just see it as so critical for so many people to getting to the good life, right? And what I love about LifeCourse and what really sparked for me was how I've personally seen and worked, and then professionally worked with many families with transition age youth who are overwhelmed, who are tired, and who are dealing with like the day to day and cannot plan 10 years down the road because they just need to get through today. And what I really like about LifeCourse is that all of the visual supports, I benefit from them too. It makes everything that seems so complicated, it makes it, you lay it out on paper and it becomes much easier to digest and much less overwhelming. So problems that seem nebulous and hard to organize become much more straightforward. And I think it's such a fabulous tool to use in those situations where people feel like it's just too much. It makes it so much easier.
Great, thank you. Allison, will you share with us what got you started?
Sure. I mean, I think there were two things that got us started. One is we were doing research with families, qualitative research, like really talking with families and individuals through focus groups, through interviews, trying to understand what do families need. And so much of what we heard through that work was families just need to get through the day, and they need information that is digestible, and that's the right information at the right time. So we were moving forward and trying to develop and test this knowledge translation strategy where we could try to figure out what is really going to work for families and lead them on the path towards employment. So that was part of it. We were working with another tool at the time that families in the study just were not engaging with. And then in the back of our minds, we knew how widespread Charting the LifeCourse was. I'm based in Boston. We know Massachusetts was using it. Many, many states were in the Supporting Families Community and Practice. And it's being used in so many places at the systems level, at the individual and family level. Providers are using it. So we really just wanted to answer some of our research questions that are really like, well, what's going to be effective for families? So it just felt like a very natural fit to say, well, let's study the effectiveness of Charting the LifeCourse.
Great, thank you. Cassidy, from your perspective?
Absolutely. So I also started using Charting the LifeCourse personally. As a family member, I am in the trenches with families preparing for employment for my own children. And I also had an opportunity to participate in a research internship at the University of Kansas through their LEND program. And my focus for that experience was really try to determine, what does the research tell us about what promotes integrated outcomes for youth? And the family kept consistently coming up in this research. And as I looked back onto my own family and what had helped us, the Charting the LifeCourse was just very tactical. It's very easy to use. It's visual, like Maya said. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that this particular framework needed to be embedded in the pre-vocational program that we were developing because we could do those things in tandem. And it wasn't just focused on the youth and their work-based learning experiences, but it was really engaging the family in this process and giving them that step-by-step, breaking this complicated process apart and creating that vision. And, really, our families, they leave with a playbook, and it's all Charting the LifeCourse tools that they can continue to go back to.
That's great. Thank you. So I'm sitting here kind of listening. We're all living in the world of COVID right now. And so it requires us to maybe change strategies in terms of the way we're interacting with the people we support and or their families. But it also, people are thinking about different things, different problem solving, different outcomes and stuff. So, what has COVID and LifeCourse, how have you been leveraging each of them or doing things differently because of COVID? So I'm going to work my way back around again. So Cassidy, I'm going to start with you.
For family, just using it as a problem solving, using this as an opportunity to reinforce that the framework is a problem solving tool, and that whether the problem is a global pandemic or the problem is inaccessible, opportunities in the community, the process is the same. So really seeing kind of a reinforcement of those key factors.
Allison?
Well, we completed this particular research study before COVID happened, but with COVID, there just seems to be such a more amplified need to engage families in non-traditional ways, such as through social media and online. And families need even more support than ever because of COVID. So it's really just like, a pandemic, but it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to show families that these tools used online can be very effective.
Yeah, and I think what your research studies showed too, with being able to use Facebook, that's a very high usage in our community with families. And so, pairing that up, especially using technology now as a means for outreach and engagement, I think that's a great research study. Maya, from your perspective.
Yeah, so personally, I've used the LifeCourse framework a lot, trying to problem solve different situations in my life, like changes in childcare, things like that. And I've definitely really appreciated how easy it makes, not easy, but it makes everything feel more manageable. Something interesting professionally that I've done is I did a webinar for APSE that Erin mentioned earlier, and we talked about how to use LifeCourse as one way to think about resources differently during the pandemic. As providers, we're having to shift the way that they provided services and supports to the folks that they serve. So that was definitely cool. And then, of course, we had to change our shift in Indiana from in-person workshops to online and paper-based products during COVID in general.
Thank you. Erin?
Yeah, so, sort of in my personal life, actually just a few weeks ago, we used the trajectory to plan around this online schoolwork for my nephew, Andy, who's 13 and has autism and is really struggling with online school. I mean, it's hard enough to connect and he doesn't speak much. And so what does that all look like? And how can he use his time at home to really get those transition skills and start thinking about, how to use that time to learn how to be more independent and work on employment? And so we've used it there. And, professionally, I've been doing some work with Maryland DDA and supporting them, and they've just done an amazing job using technology to communicate with families in ways that are just deeper. They have regular webinars, open opportunities for people to speak with leadership, and that's really advising sort of their thoughts on how do you reopen and, how do you move forward as a system given where we are.
Thank you. Danae?
So as I mentioned earlier, we customized that hospital profile. We used that one-page profile and created a customized profile, which listed medications. It listed like the next point of contact in case a family member could not. This was before family members could go in. So we used that initially. But then with our moving out with support series, that was supposed to be an in-person series. So we had to shift quite quickly to Zoom. Which was our tech had to, basically increase overnight. But with that, we were able to take the presentations that we were going to do in person and record them so that families could go through the profile at their own pace. So we provided them with like homework after each session so that they could do each tool and learn the tool on their own in their own time. So we recorded my voice kind of going through each tool, and they would be able to go back to each time, go back to it and then use it for a variety of different things, not just this moving out series, but they can use it for other ways to problem solve in their life. Like my colleagues were saying here, you can use it for childcare. You can use it for, oh my gosh, my school is now going hybrid. I need to be able to figure that out, right? So using the tools and being able to record it wasn't something that we would have come up with had it not been for what I call the bright side of COVID.
Great, thank you. So one of the questions over in the chat, and it's always something that maybe is a little intimidating if you're sitting there listening to this, like how do you go from like not ever hearing about it, or maybe you hear about it, to then like you guys are applying it all over the place. Sometimes it's research, it's systems change, you're using it to respond to COVID, you're problem solving. Some people you've talked about how you're embedding it into schools, or people are doing it with their waivers. And like, I always tell people when they kind of ask me about LifeCourse is like the beauty and curse of LifeCourse is like it can help with so many things. It can help on so many levels with strategic thinking and planning, and it can do on all of this. And so that can also be the intimidating part about it, about like how do you get started, or how did you guys find out about it? Like who introduced it to you? So I think what the question really is like, how did you get engaged with it? How did you find out about it? But, or how are we scaling it and spreading it too? I think that's kind of the biggest thing. So Maya, I'm going to start with you on that.
Thanks. So like I mentioned earlier, Indiana started using the Charting LifeCourse framework in 2016. And so I worked a lot with VR, Vocational Rehabilitation as an agency, and their sister agency was the group who was implementing it widely. And so we had a lot of work over time with both groups, and it was something that was I learned about it kind of ancillarily being related to it, and then had the opportunity with Aaron's old coworker, Kathy Anderson, my new coworker, who introduced me to the Charting the LifeCourse framework and really getting into it, and all the benefits of becoming an ambassador. So I think I got lucky to be dragged into it.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to ask others of you too, but I'm also going to kind of it's the LifeCourse is very grassroots driven. And so, some people say to me, well, how do I get involved? How do I find out about it? And so again, the beauty and curse of the fact that it's really coming from people with disabilities and their families, really driving it. It's really been bottom up as opposed to top down. And so, we're in this really exciting junction where a lot of people want to get exposed to it and want to learn how, and we're all trying to figure out ways to scale it just as fast as we can to as many people as we can. So, part of people attending this session today, it's about how do I get involved? Some people start out by checking out the website, emailing us on the website or in your state. Sometimes it's the state agency. Sometimes it's your developmental disabilities council. Sometimes it's a mom or a dad who just thinks it's really cool and they're like spreading it in their own school. So I wish I had a better answer to tell people how to go to get it in their local communities, but we're a national network of people who support it. So it's about finding one of us and us helping you get connected to a local activity in your local area. So that's one way. The LifeCourse Tools website is brand new. We are hoping that it's more informative. We recognize that it's probably not as family friendly as it needs to be right now. We were having a conversation saying it's more like going into a teacher's store than actually going in and learning something. But your classrooms are really all of the people that are on this webinar series today. So Allison, from your perspective, how did you sort of scale yourself up in the learning?
Well, the scaling up and spreading and disseminating, that's kind of what we want to be doing when we think that using research is a tool for that, because once we can say, and research is not the be all end all, of course, but there is some positive things to say, once something is evidence-based, like it really makes a difference. We can show with numbers and with stories. I mean, everyone has so many stories about how effective it is. But when we can say through research that, yes, this is effective, then I think it really compels people to use it more and to really kind of scale it up and disseminate it. One issue that we've had and that we're working towards is really identifying families who may not be engaged in systems, and they probably could really use charting the life course. But how do we find those families if they're not engaged in systems? Maybe we find them through schools or through faith-based initiatives or faith-based organizations or community organizations. But we really want to be able to identify, all different types of families that could benefit.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that's like ultimately when it was developed with that in mind, right? It wasn't developed to be a tool used by professionals. It was developed for families by families, so that inside or outside of the system, that how can you truly drive your own life and have access to it. So that's a really, really great point. Cassidy, you sort of jumped in and went to the showcase because it was in your backyard. But so for others, what would your suggestion be of like, how do you get started if you don't know where to get started?
I think that personally, utilizing the Missouri Family to Family Network is definitely been a key factor in my own development with utilizing the Charting the Life course. Because it is in my backyard, obviously that's a huge resource that I have available to me. But, Shelley, you really spoke to we're a national network, and there is opportunities for everybody that's on this call to reach out to somebody that may be in their state or that might be in their region and really just connect with them offline and take that step-by-step approach. For me, it was really an investment in knowing this is a tool I want to familiarize myself with to the point that I can then bring it full circle and back to other families that are in my community. So, making that personal commitment as well is also a huge part of that.
That's great. Thank you. Danae?
Sure. So initially we started trying to use the tools with families, but because we have such a complex, group of families, like families from in our region have to travel from all over. And I'm not saying that in everybody else's region that's not the same, but our traffic pattern is crazy. It's horrendous. So we were trying to use it with families initially, but then it kind of transitioned to using it at Seek because that's where I work and that's where I was familiar with using the tools. But I would say that for someone who's just being introduced, for me, being an ambassador, I was involved with the Maryland Community of Practice for supporting families. And that was my introduction to becoming an ambassador. And that investment of time is what really jump-started and ignited my being able to use the tools. And it was something as simple as printing it off of the website and just sitting down and filling it out and then saying, I don't like that. And then taking and printing it out again and saying, okay, I'm going to do that again. I don't like that. And then ripping that up and just keep doing that until you feel like, okay, I have something here that I don't mind to share with another person that I know it's going to impact my life or my son's life or the people that we support at Seek. I know it's going to have an impact because I've spent some time, I've invested that time, even if it's just a 15-minute a day, just having the printouts there initially is what I would have, like a stack of printouts and just write stuff down on it. Using it often is what created what people would say expertise. I just say I use it. And so printing it off, using it, and maybe watching a video while I'm doing the dishes. That's something that's really practical that you can do. It's tangible. As parents, we don't have a lot of time to invest outside of, focusing and nurturing our families. So I think that just saying to yourself and being intentional and saying, I really want to get to know something that's going to help lighten my load. That was what was impactful for me. And then I was able to pass that information on professionally. So start with just printing it out and filling it out. I mean, you can even do it now. They have made it so much easier where you can fill it out online, so you don't have to print it out. But I'm a printer. I know I'm wasting paper, but I also recycle.
Thank you. And Erin, I'm going to get to you in just 1 second to answer that question, but I want to kind of come back to some of the things that people were saying is like, personally, I do agree that you just have to jump in and start doing something. And everybody starts in thinking that's their favorite tool and they're scared to try the other one. And then they end up falling in love with the other one. So there's lots of different things online to do that. You're hearing people mention the Ambassador series. And, that's a series that people go through when they're really thinking about that integration and implementation. And, before we were only doing this when agencies called and said, hey, we wanted to do this. We are now opening up ambassador series for anybody, and we're doing them on a quarterly basis. And so we do some around person-centered planners. We have some around family leadership. We have some for educators. We have some specifically for providers. And so we're continuing to hone in and make those as specific as possible for the different professions within those different arenas. So that's one way. The other thing we haven't really shared publicly yet, but starting in the spring, we're going to be launching a skill building series that will, it's kind of, I always tell people, you should go to that before you go to the Ambassador series. It's really that for that practitioner, that family person who really wants to learn how to use it in their own life or use it with other people. So that will be an open series that will start, anyone can sign up for it and participate in it. And we're really excited about that. We used to travel around the states and do stuff. Hopefully one day we will do that again. And so, Erin, real quickly, so from you're sort of starting, what was?
Yeah, I mean, like everyone else, right? Using the tools gave me a really different perspective on it. And it's one thing to share it with families and ask them to fill it out. And it's a whole other thing to do it yourself. And you really begin to realize what you're asking of people. And it makes you much more thoughtful, right? I think in terms of scaling and sustainability for me as a professional, right, my job has been to step back and create space for family members to share the tools with each other and family members of kids with very complex disabilities to talk about in real terms, how are they thinking about employment and how are they using the tools and be able to talk to each other about it. It's just so much more effective, right? And so creating space and creating access and amplifying those voices, I really see as the best way to help move this forward and scale.
Great. So somebody can raise their hand and answer. I'm going to kind of weave together a couple questions into this so you can answer it from whatever perspective you want. But so it's really interesting. LifeCourse sort of just evolved, and now because it's so many people, it resonates with so many different people. We're really trying to make sure it's as inclusive as possible, and in a lot of different arenas. So some people said, well, how are we being inclusive in terms of the people we're doing outreach with? Are we working with all communities in terms of their race and ethnicity, their language, even their socioeconomic status? We've even talked about how do we make sure our language and our icons are more culturally aware. We recently had an opportunity we've always believed that it's a very human-centric framework and that our attempt is to be as inclusive as possible. When it's not, we work with our partners to make it more inclusive. So when someone comes to us and says, we want it in Chinese, we worked with a bunch of families in California and we translated them all into Chinese and then recognized we need to really work on some of the words that didn't translate through the culture. Recently, we worked with self-advocates and families from Bulgaria, and we were really hesitant. Do we use the framework to organize this conversation we were having over there? And the concepts resonated with them. The concepts of the 3 circles and it being a barrier of services and the star and the 3 buckets. It was amazing that even though I didn't speak their language, they didn't speak English, those images really resonated with them and it created a common ground. So when you're thinking about this, either can you share a story of how you reached out to another family in another culture or another language, or how it's helped you maybe bridge some things, especially as we look at many of the injustices going on within Black communities, so, are there things that you're doing or an impact story that you could share with our listeners? I know I kind of threw a whole bunch of stuff at you right there. I guess really the underlying question is really culture and life course. I think I want people to walk away realizing that I always tell people the open-endedness of it, of filling something out and a person putting their responses there that are their culture and their language, and is a way of really giving voice to them. I just don't know if there's different experiences you have or examples or ways that you've tried to utilize these and really bring in that concept of culture. Maya, do you have something you'd want to share?
Yeah. So I'm half Chinese. And so my dad is from Hong Kong, grew up there. And then my mom is from Indiana, and grew up in the culture that most of us know. And it's funny because work is actually an area at work, and disability is an area where we saw cultural clash in my own personal family. So in the Chinese culture, and what my dad saw growing up was, if a person has a disability, they're a valued member of the family, but they are protected and cared for. And they are not necessarily a person who is going out into the community. And also the whole idea of in Chinese culture of it being, family units are so important. And so one thing that I thought about, especially when we were doing the trainings for schools, and something that we've had to talk about in my own personal family is, your vision for a good life, and what that means to you is, of course, different for everyone. And what work looks like is different for everyone. And it's important for me as a professional to consider that my idea for a good life is not your idea, right? And even, it's very humbling when I go to my family and they're like, you don't know what you're talking about. That's not what we want, right? It's something that I think the framework allows for open conversations and perhaps facilitating some of those conversations. And it definitely helped my own family move forward in figuring out what that vision for a good life looks like. And I think that there's lots of opportunities for compromise and figuring things out when we use the framework.
Danae?
Yeah, so me personally, in my work, I have had some impact because in our agencies, our DSPs are primarily Black Americans or African-born Black people. And so in using the tools, we, especially within our teams and our cohorts, we are able to learn so much about each other. And I think that opening up of the conversation, that listening piece, is what is helping to connect the dots for some of our DSPs and in the work that we're doing. It's helping them to understand the families better and their understanding of what they want to see for their son or daughter. It's helping them to understand, to be heard, and to have a voice, and to be able to say, this is our struggle day to day. And so I think that is where it helps culturally within our organization. But I will say that for the Maryland community of practice, it's been such a delight being a part of that, just seeing the different partners in that community of practice. There's one particular colleague, Azeb Adere, and she runs an all Ethiopian parent support group. And so the things that she's brought to the table and the ways that she's helped to support the families in her community and in that culture, it's been amazing to watch her evolve. So maybe not me personally, but watching another colleague evolve, and it always plants that seed, like we need to be doing more for that specific culture. So when you said you translated something into Chinese, I was thinking, oh, seriously, Amharic is like, so I live in Silver Spring, and this is like very much Ethiopian central point in America. It's like very huge Ethiopian community. And so translating stuff in Amharic to us is like Spanish and Amharic. Those are the two languages that we should translate into. So hearing that, it just gave me an idea to say, to work with my partner and to say to her, what needs to be translated and who can we work with to get that translated?
Well, and I think that's the value of people recognizing that the Charting the Life Course Nexus, we're really co-op like, so to speak. So when someone comes to us, I say, if you can help me translate it into whatever language you want, I will put it back into the tools and make them pretty and get them back out to you, and then make them available to everybody on the website. So behind the scenes, every tool is being translated into Spanish, and within actually the next week, probably all of them should be popped up on there. So we're very excited about that. The Chinese ones, if people realize we've switched our formatting recently, so now we're not only switching ourselves into a new format, but then trying to get all of our languages updated. So I think all of us own making sure that it's culturally sensitive, that the languages are available, and really working in partnership to do that. And I'm gonna open it up, Aaron and Cassidy, if you guys wanted to respond to that. But real fast, one of the questions that I see in the chat box is related to those with different, maybe more significant disabilities. And I will tell you, we have been partnering with the Helen Keller Center and the National Deafblind Organization, and really working with their family engagement staff that are in with the schools to really start understanding the integration and the implementation, working with families who have children who are more significantly have disabilities, and just to see what are things that maybe could be adjusted, or some new tools, or some new aspects that we could add to our language to be all inclusive. So there are some communities that are doing that. There are quite a few families who have children who have all different types of disabilities, and so a lot of times it's about getting hooked up to other family members who have figured out how to integrate those. We're running late on time, so I don't know if Aaron, Allison, or Cassidy, if you wanted to answer any question or put any final thoughts on there as we sort of start wrapping up. Aaron, sorry, Cassidy.
I would just like to speak to you, Shelley, what you mentioned about the framework being accessible to individuals of all ability levels, and making it accessible to our self-advocates who are more profoundly affected. My son, just from personal experience, my son is effectively nonverbal. He is effectively illiterate. And so at first brush, the tools aren't accessible to him. And one of my biggest challenges has been, how do I make this tool work for our entire family and engage him in the process of expressing what does his good life look like? And it really just started with something as simple as making a really big trajectory and getting pictures of his preferred and non-preferred activities, and then just showing him, okay, the things you like, they go up here, the things you don't like, they go down here. And then took it one step further with behaviors and videos of things that pushed his trajectory one way or the other. And it was really just kind of an evolution. And that's a lot of that happens at my kitchen table, but then using that as an example with our other families who we work with, who they come to us and they say, my child can't read, or, how am I going to use this with my child who isn't able to express and use that voice. So I know personally it's possible, and I hope that there's continued conversations about that as the framework continues to grow.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Cassie. That's wonderful. Aaron, did you want to add anything as we start closing up?
Yeah, that was amazing. I was just going to say I had this opportunity to present about the tools in Egypt not that long ago as a professional fellow. And what was amazing to me was it really is universal, right? All over the world, there are family members, largely moms, right? Creating a better world for their children and asking for something better and being part of that change. And the tools just resonated amazingly, like all the way across the world.
Thanks for sharing that. I always love hearing the stories. It's almost like we need a map on there of like, where did it go? And I hope that people, come out of this walking away feeling a part of like this network and this conversation, and that you can learn about it, learn from each other, and take it places, and always come back and share with us, because I'm always amazed at the different things people do. Panelists, you guys were wonderful. Again, I could probably spend all day asking you questions and sharing with you. So I really appreciate this. People can watch this archived webinar. They also have their Friday features, and I'm sure they would love to be contacted to answer any other questions. I'm going to have all the panelists turn their cameras off for now, but don't go too far away, and share with you guys just a couple more things as we wrap up so you know about some other opportunities available. Let's get back on my screen. So people have been mentioning becoming an ambassador, and there's been a couple questions about it. So we just kicked off in October a whole new series that I was just telling you about. So there was person-centered planning, person-centered thinking. Our trainers and mentors supposed to say person-centered thinking. And so we will be doing those again, kicking them off again in January. So check out our website if you're interested in becoming an ambassador. And if you become an ambassador, you're part of our virtual network. And so we will have opportunities for you to share with other ambassadors, give ideas, ask questions, have access to tools that maybe aren't open on our website. These are a couple others. We've really been working with aging disability resource centers and their No Wrong Door staff, as well as really wanting to start working with providers, direct support professionals, and what does this look like in practice at the service delivery level. The other thing is your organization can contact us. We are more than happy to put together a presentation for you. We can obviously do this virtually, and we can also work with the organizations to think about how to integrate this on your projects or your teams. So a couple of the questions were about how do I get into my waiver? How do I get it into our schools? A lot of times it's about calling us and kind of us talking through the best strategy and who's the person in your state or your organization that we can provide them or you information with about how to get engaged with LifeCourse. So we hope you reach out to some of those opportunities. But before everyone jumps off, I wanted to, each of our monthly sessions, we have an opportunity to really focus in on one person who's been a partner with us, who has really been working to integrate and implement and really enhance Charting the Life course for a specific area. We're really excited about this one. Each one has sort of a different theme. We did one around employment. We're doing one around person-centered outcomes. And this one is really around research. So if Allison could turn her camera on, we would really appreciate that, which means I have to turn mine off. Allison? So Allison, you are the recipient of this month's award. And so I think that your husband is nearby. If not, he hasn't come into the room yet. He has an award for you. And I will just tell you, a number of people are in on this. So there's people watching that you don't know about. I think there might be some other family members as well. But when we asked some people, we feel like you deserve the award because we're so excited that you're helping us really move into evidence-based and research. And so it's amazing to partner with you. And I love our partnership, and I learned so much from you guys. We asked some other people to say some things about you, and they said that you're a wonderful coworker, and you have a high sense of professionalism, and you really have a steady leadership to really kind of push things forward. Your husband's super proud of you. He loves your work ethic and your dedication. Everybody knows how hard it is for you to be in Arizona and working in a different time zone. So thank you for your dedication to research and to LifeCourse and to really supporting great lives for people with disabilities. So thank you.
Thank you. This is very unexpected, and I have an amazing team. I see some people have popped up on Zoom. We work as a team at ICI, and I mentioned earlier, John Shepard, Jamie Timmons, Jen Bowes have all been really, Crystal Bell from Charting the Life course have all been really engaged as well. So thank you so much.
You are welcome. And thank you, our husband and everybody that helped get this award too. We always try to surprise our applicant, our awardees. So we always have to figure out who can get it to them. And then all of a sudden we find out Allison's not in Boston and we're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to get this to her not being there? So that was fun. So well-deserved, Allison. We're going to need a picture of you later, but we'll talk to you about that soon. A couple people have asked if this is recorded. It is recorded. It will be online as soon as we can get it. Make sure that captioning is good. And then if you could take the exit poll, we'd really appreciate it. We hope you join us next month when we really focus on hearing from self-advocates and families on how they're using LifeCourse in their lives. So there's the November focus. And again, we want to thank our sponsors and we want to thank you for spending the last hour and a half with us, hearing from our wonderful panel. Hope everybody has a great day.